Hello and welcome to the Spooky Chris podcast. I am Chris Ringler, your aforementioned Spooky Chris, and I welcome you to my podcast. This time around, I am honored to have author Paul Vecchiet back on. Paul was on in February to talk about his book, this Disclosure Paradox, Book 1, which had come out that month in February, and it was kind of a story about military secrets and extraterrestrials and mysteries. And Paul has the second book in the series, Disclosure Paradox Book 2 Salvation, coming out in September, also from Right Way Books. And I thought it would be a great time to have him back on and talk about it. Talk about kind of, the journey he's been on with these books and what he's been up to. So Disclosure Paradox Book 2 Salvation, it's a conspiracy book about agents trying to steal the Shroud of Turin. And it gets into the ideas about the blood of Jesus and his DNA, and it sounds like a really fascinating book, and continues kind of this interesting path he's been on, kind of digging into these deeper conspiracies and ideas. He is a science fiction author, licensed architect, veteran, and he is a senior design manager in his non-writing life. And I look forward to having a conversation with him. And I invite you to listen along and come with us. Thanks.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining me again, Paul. How are you?
Very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me at such a quick notice, actually. And it's great to be back. And I'm pretty sure that your memory is fresh from what we talked about last time.
Absolutely. And you kind of filled my head. So first thing I want to ask is, how was the reaction to Disclosure Paradox Book 1?
It's still going on, and it seems like whenever I have an interview, there's a bump. Um, and it seems that's the best way for people to know that it's around. I'll tell you one thing: it's got a 4.72 rating on Goodreads
Awesome.
with reviews. Um, it's on 5 categories in Goodreads, in genre, in the science fiction genre, and it's rating very high there. Um, it's the problem is to get people to realize it's there. And I have a web designer now that is helping me out with, getting the searches. The website has been getting a lot of activity. So I think, we're still in the infancy.
Which that's what that's good to hear though. I think that's the thing is I think people forget that a book doesn't die once it's released. It's kind of it's an evergreen, and it's just kind of always there for people to discover. So that's great to hear that people are still discovering it.
Yeah, yeah. I recently I was a guest on Caravan to Midnight with John V. Wells from Coast to Coast, and the next day it it rocketed from being ranked in Amazon at 1.8 million to 57,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that that is amazing.
That's fantastic. Before we kind of start talking about the new book, I want to talk a little bit kind of in general, your writing. So you mix science fiction and religion, faith, and the search for life in the universe and kind of a higher truth kind of all together and make it make sense. Why are you so fascinated with, I mean, what fascinates you about all these subjects, personally?
So there's a couple things. The important thing to understand is that I am writing science fiction on topics that people would normally not read on nonfiction. There are many books about UFOs, ETs, conspiracy theories, contact, abductions, but there are people that just will not accept the fact that there is other life out there and that they're affecting our lives. So I write science fiction to attract that crowd. The same goes for the second book, which is about the Shroud of Turin. And there are many people that have said that it is a medieval forgery. People that don't believe that Jesus even existed. So again, I write it as science fiction to attract a crowd that likes science fiction, but I write it. I attract that crowd so that because they are not the kind of people that would read about the Shroud nonfiction. They just would not. So it's kind of bridging that gap between science fiction and in fact between science and religion. In fact, both books bridge that gap, and I think we need to get those two closer together.
No, that makes perfect sense, and you're right. That is a good vehicle to kind of bring these ideas up and to kind of plant the seeds for people to discover things on their own. So you're right. That's a great idea. Um, what what keeps people so fascinated? No matter what information comes out or is debunked or whatever, like keeps them so fascinated with the search for extraterrestrial life. It's always kind of in people's minds.
Yeah, and with the second book, I give them another hypothesis that involves extraterrestrials and links it with Christianity.
That's cool. Like, all right, so cool. We'll have to, yeah, we'll have to dig in. And my last one before we kind of get into the second book, like in your mind. So say, and I think we got into a little bit. Say we make contact tomorrow with another life
Yeah,
form. How do
right.
things change? Like, what do you think would change?
Well, as I mentioned in the first novel, um, Disclosure, and it's titled the Disclosure Paradox because the paradox is that uh, the result of disclosure will not be the kind of result that people are anticipating. That the consequences will be the kind that we would not like, and that's because we are spiritually not ready to have a relation with the rest of the universe. So if we were to have disclosure, I think first of all it would be a mistake, and second of all I think it would be forced. That whoever is the entity that would be disclosed would probably be against their will, and they are very concerned that disclosure would lead to a technological exchange where we would get that technology, weaponize it, and use it against them.
Yeah, that's a scary thought, but I can't argue with what with your line of thinking. Like that's just yeah, you're right. That's where we are at is not quite. We're not ready. We want to be. We're not ready. Saying that, so tell me a little about Disclosure Paradox Book Two, Salvation.
All right. The plot is that uh, there is a murder in the Vatican, and it involves a conspiracy to steal the Shroud of Turin. Um, there is an insider in the Vatican that makes a deal with malevolent beings that are after the blood of Christ because the blood of Christ has a DNA and the DNA is special, and they can take the DNA and weaponize it for use against benevolent entities. So that's the premise behind the book, and it's based on fact. There's an entire chapter on the facts behind the shroud that authenticate it, and one of the critical parts about this book, because it is about the blood of Christ, is that the fact is that there are 376 verses in the Bible that mention the blood of Christ. And I don't think that's as an accident or a coincidence. I think there's something intentional about that. And when um, Jesus said that his blood will wash away the sins of the earth, I'm taking that literally. So the premise is, what if in the future we would have technology to harvest Christ's DNA and then use it to repair our own DNA, which is what I mentioned in the first book, is our original sin. Our DNA makes us violent, barbaric, and having all these flaws that we have. So that's the premise in that book, and that's how the two tie together.
Amazing. So, well, I kind of get into it a little bit more. Um, in preparing for the conversation, you had kind of relayed a really interesting story. Do you mind getting into that kind of the germ that kind of, rekindled the fire in you for this?
Right. I had no intention of writing this book. I had no intention of writing a third book because the first book that I self-published wasn't doing well, and it was a very disheartening experience. Um, I didn't expect the difficulty and just the apparent failure. You know, I didn't anticipate that, so I had no intention of writing the book. However, out of nowhere, a former Benedictine monk decided to search extraterrestrials and religion and found my first book. He read it, he liked it, and he friended me, and he sent me a message. He said, he told me he liked the book a lot, and what all the messages that were in there, mixing science with religion and spirituality. I wouldn't say religion; it's more spiritual than religious. Um, and he said, do you know what's missing in this book? He said, the Shroud of Turin. And I didn't think much of it, but eventually he sent me over 300 documents of research papers from all over the world, scientists, researchers, enthusiasts that wrote about the Shroud in their own discipline that authenticate the Shroud. Botany, blood science, archaeology, art history, even linen history, all those things that point that the Shroud is authentic. And I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. So it was very easy for me to come up with an idea for a sequel. And I wrote a quick outline. I sent it to him, and he liked it. And then in 6 months, I wrote a manuscript, sent to him, and he liked it so much that he actually wrote the foreword for it. And he is a prominent researcher, well known throughout the circles of Shroud enthusiasts and historians. His name is Joseph Marino. He's written nine books on the subject matter. He's been doing research for over 40 years, and he is the president of the Shroud Education and Research Association. So that was a big shot in the arm. However, uh, um, I had to go through the same process that I went with the first book. I thought I would be self-publishing, right? So I decided, to go through the process. I wrote a query letter, and while I was doing the queries and I was getting rejections one after another, just like I did with the first one, um, sometime I got a instant message from a person that I didn't know that asked me to allow him to join a group that I happened to be a administrator of. I was made administrator of this group for writers called Word Journeys on Facebook. About 700 people on that group, and so I let him in, and he said, by the way, I am the founder, and he had to leave because of cancer treatment. So anyway, he asked me what I was doing. And he thanked me for what I being the administrator. And as a gesture of goodwill, he just asked to look at my query letter, edited it, and made some corrections. And then when he discovered that it described something interesting, he asked to look at the manuscript. So I sent him the manuscript, and he offered to edit it at a very low rate. He's a very good editor. He's a prominent author. He's written books for memoirs for famous people. So he's like a ghostwriter. And one of his books is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's about Rod Stewart's lead guitarist. So he's a really good editor and author. And when we finished the editing, he said, I have a publisher that may like this. So passed it on to publisher. Publisher liked it. When they found out I had 2 other books in the series, they asked to look at those. They liked them. And it turned out that I got the contract with the publisher. And so we republished the first one, with the one that you mentioned, back in February. And then this one will be coming out in September. So all of this, me and you talking like this about the second book, would not happen if it wasn't for that former Benedictine monk looking for a book on extraterrestrials and spirituality. And then the rest is just like, an amazing story.
Yeah, it is. Holy cow. Did he ever tell you why he was looking for those two queries? Like, because I'm real curious why he was looking for extraterrestrials with that.
So he's got that, as I mentioned, he wrote the foreword, and he explains what I mentioned to you in the foreword. He said, occasionally I do searches on Amazon for UFOs and spirituality. And one of the searches hits that I got was the novel called Disclosure Paradox by Paul Vecchiet. So he occasionally does that on his own. He's very respected in the Catholic circles, but I guess he's kind of, he goes rogue every once in a while. And it's actually good fortune that he did that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Holy cow. What's the journey been kind of to go back and to look at that first book again with new eyes, and then kind of to take on the second book, since like you say you did self-publishing and didn't feel like it kind of captured what you had hoped, so you got a chance kind of to revisit it with a re-release. What was that like?
Well, the re-release and the having a publisher, they have editors, so they actually pointed out some things that improved the book tremendously. And it wasn't like there was a change in the plot or a change in characters or anything like that. It was things that made the difference between a very good book and a good book. And so, me being an architect, and I write technical documents, I tend to be narrative. And so a lot of the places that I had in the book originally that were describing what people were saying, they said, I want to see what these people are actually saying. I don't want you to tell me what they're saying. And they said one way to strengthen your characters is by having them say things that fit with their character. So we went through the book and we did that. And there was also a backstory in that book. And it was kind of long. It was probably in the wrong place. So we kind of changed that. We made the introductory chapter shorter, because a key secret that some writers don't know is that readers like to have a short chapter in the beginning just to feel like they're progressing, you know. So we did that. And as I said, very impactful things, but not the kind of thing that actually changed the story, the meaning, or the plot.
That's awesome. While you were kind of researching the second book, did you kind of come to any, did it change any of your opinions or open your mind to new ideas on some of the things that you've been kind of thinking about and writing about?
Well, it's what it certainly did. It opened my eyes. Is I had I had doubts about the stories of Jesus and the resurrection and his existence. Um, but learning about the shroud, what caused the image, that is something uh, the Catholics call it a miracle. My idea is that as we apply science to this knowledge, um, the the veil of the miracle goes away, and we start to actually get an understanding of why things happen. For example, the image on that shroud was made by a radiological event. It was radiation that caused that shroud. When he resurrected, he emitted radiation. So, I
Interesting.
mean, that's amazing.
Wow. So why do you think there's such a gulf between science and faith? Because you mentioned earlier, like there really is. It's you're either on one side or the other. There isn't kind of a bridge between them usually.
Right. But I think we are building the bridge. And one of the things, I was at a symposium for the Shroud of Turin early this month. And when there was a question and answer session with panelists, and I kind of threw a grenade in there. I said, I because I said, what I recognize here is that as we improve technology and we are able to apply science to understanding the shroud, I think it becomes less and less of a miracle and more of a a physical entity of a special kind of science that we don't understand. And of course, a lot of people who are very strong Catholic and even evangelical, sorry, um, they they were very very possessive of that word miracle. They feel that there are miracles and you can't tell me that there aren't any miracles. And my thought is, no, as we start to learn about these things, the logic tells us what really happened, and it's not that it's a miracle. It's just that there's a certain type of science that we don't understand that was applied.
That's amazing. So between the two books, what was the process like? Did it differ for writing this one? In kind of, you said you wrote it in 6 months. Like, did you feel like it's kind of this sudden, reinvigoration, a drive to get it done?
That's the one thing that I keep on trying to remember is how is it that I wrote it so easily, because the plot is very intricate. There, there's a lot of twists and turns. There are surprises. Um, it's multifaceted because it involves so many characters, and um, it's a web of integrating the shroud itself with meditation and out of body experiences with these interdimensionals that are after the shroud, and with what happened in the first book at Dulce, where they rescued those children from the underground laboratory by the reptilians. it's all related, and somehow I was able to seamlessly put together this plot in that short amount of time, uh, and that kind of amazes me because being a first time writer, well, this is my second book, right? But first time writer, things like that don't normally happen for writers that have that little experience. So I think I had help. I think I had some sort of, you know, some sort of spiritual push there. And it's quite possible that the message that it's intended to get across, which is uh, really understanding what the shroud represents and telling people that may be atheists that there's something beyond what you think you can see, and just to open their minds, not in a way to attack their their character, but in a way to offer to add more color to their life, if you will.
Um, have you ever like kind of thought about what you would, let's say someone came and they wanted to adapt it for a film. Have you ever considered like kind of the what if on that? Like, or if it would be possible to kind of capture all of this in films?
I think so. I think this one, the second novel, has a much better, uh, but much better, I guess, chance, or is more adaptable to film than the first one, because the first one had, first of all, there was a lot involved there, and the first one really didn't have a strong protagonist. It was more of a group thing. And people that make films, they like to have a main character that is very strong, where um, the audience can relate with. And in this one, the Salvation, the main character is Robert Ladd, who shows up in the first book, who is um, a ranger, former ranger veteran, PTSD, and he was in Iraq, and in Iraq he befriended this Italian army um, sergeant, and together they made a friendship. And it's his army sergeant that disappears. He finds out, and so he goes to Italy to find out what happened to him.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that sounds, it sounds like with the subject matter and stuff, it sounds like stuff that someone would be interested in if it got in the right, ear to adapt. So I've wondered what kind of, it's not out yet. The second book
Yeah.
comes out in September. Do you have plans for signings or appearances, or any kind of like, are you thinking of any kind of promotions that you're looking at?
Oh yeah, sure. I've been doing that with the first book, and it's just local right now. But I've been doing that. Uh, we have a cultural center in town, and uh, after the launch, I'll probably have a an activity where people, first of all, I'll state why I wrote the book, the things that moved me to write the book, and then I'll have some sample excerpts that I will talk about and explain why I wrote those excerpts, and then we'll have a question and answer session. I did that with the first book; it was very very successful. So I'll do it with the second one too. And I think I have some friends that are setting up some. They call them salons, where you get a group of people together and you talk about either a book or a film or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. There's some folks in our area that do something like that as well. So okay, cool. Have Do you find you enjoy kind of being face to face to people and like kind of putting it in their hand and being able to kind of make that connection. With sales are great, but like making a connection with someone who's open minded to what you're writing is a lot more rewarding. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, I'm not uncomfortable with it. I find it natural for me to talk about it because it's something that I know about. If I know what I'm talking about, I'm comfortable with it. And fortunately, it's all been with people that I know, but I think I could handle it with people that I don't know too.
Have you had anyone reaching out, um, other than Mr. Marino, um, with their own stories, and like kind of just wanting to get your thoughts on them?
Um, I mean, someone that is asking about my story,
Well,
or
with their own
uh,
kind of experiences with potential extraterrestrials or
oh,
just like any kind
oh,
of
right,
any of that kind of thing.
yeah. Regarding the first book, there are people that come to me and say, hey, I've had an experience, or I know somebody who says that they were abducted, or and many times they come to me and say, just the other day I saw something in the sky, and they describe it to me, um, so obviously, UFOs and extraterrestrials, it's a very broad subject, and there are all kinds of things that you can talk about with that. On this one, um, it'll be interesting to see what people say once they read it, and how they relate to it. Um, I I am interested if there are atheists out there that will read it and ask me questions. I'm looking forward to that because it's the atheists that I've had very much difficulty with on the first book. That they just if you don't have any proof, even like these meditative out of body experiences, they are very doubtful about things like that. They're very um, strong willed on staying with their own what I call dogma of if you can't prove it, it doesn't exist.
Interesting. What do you hope folks come away with, from after they read this book, or really kind of the two bookended? Like, what's your hope that people walk away with?
There are a lot of spiritual parts in this book. Um, there are a lot of parts in the book where I describe real Christians, not the ones that are self described Bible thumpers that are damning people that are of different color, or that are, homosexual, or that are of a different, gender. The people that I describe of faith are genuine. Um, and the things that I describe related to Jesus are genuine and authentic. There's a passage where Robert, who is an atheist, meets up with a Catholic policeman who is suspicious of Robert, and they get into a conversation about why Robert is there. By the way, he's in the Vatican Gardens, okay, and it's during Lent, and the policeman is there. He's very pious, and he's talking about thinking about Jesus at Gethsemane, and, and the passion of being in the garden. And Robert obviously doesn't see it, so there is an immediate conflict there, and there's a back and forth between the atheist and the believer. And eventually, Robert goes away from being an atheist after he goes into a coma after he's attacked with a nerve agent. Um, and during that time in a coma, his friend who was murdered, his spirit appears to him, tells him some things, and Jesus appears to him and tells him some things, and that's where Robert changes from an atheist to a believer, but not a Christian, just a believer about what he saw. So there's a lot of that. And then finally, Robert, Katrina, and the chief of Interpol, who they make friends with, who helps them on this investigation. The chief invites them to the Colosseum during Lent, Holy Thursday, where they do the Stations of the Cross. And at the Stations of the Cross, I describe what is happening, the prayers that the Catholics are saying, and it's all about just getting back to the goodness of being a Catholic. Where there's a family there with a child that has Down syndrome. There's a family there with a child with cerebral palsy. There's a immigrant family, and all of those families, they carry the cross in succession during that event. I don't know if you're familiar with the Stations of the Cross. It's
No, yeah, no.
every station is a something that happened to Jesus on his way to crucifixion, and there are 14 stations of the cross. And it starts out with him being arrested, and it ends with him being nailed to the cross. So it's a succession. It's a very it's strictly Catholic. The Christians don't do it really that much, although they know what it is, but it's not like in the Protestant faith. And the great thing about this event that happens in the Colosseum is that I explain how all of these people that are carrying the cross have something that leads us to have compassion, to reach back and be human and be compassionate for all these people. So there's some of that in the book, not just a murder and a conspiracy and demons showing up out of nowhere and things like that.
Amazing. And we're about at the end here. I can't thank you enough. Now, uh, this comes out, like Disclosure Paradox Book 2 Salvation comes out mid-September, right?
September 16th. Yep.
Perfect. And
You
they
can people can pre-order it if they go to my website, thedisclosureparadox.com. They could even read reviews that are being done and are going to be put in the book in pre-publication. I've got 2 reviews, and so far 4 are on the way. But people are human, and sometimes things get in the way, so they can't make the date. But it'll be in other editions as we go along, and they could read the forward from Joe Marino as well.
fantastic. I cannot thank you enough, and I wish you all the best with this book and look forward to speaking with you in the future about your next project.
That'll be in June or May 2026. That'll be the 3rd book, which was the 2nd book pre-published, which is the prequel. So yeah, we
Awesome.
can get together for that too.
That is great. You take care of yourself, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
I want to thank Paul Vecchiet for making time to be on the podcast again. That was amazing. Again, the Disclosure Paradox Book 1 is out now. You can find it on Books A Million and Amazon.com, and probably your favorite retail outlet can get their hands on it. And Disclosure Paradox Book 2 will be coming out in September 2025, so this year. You can get all of the information about his series at thedisclosureparadox.com. He has an Instagram account. It's instagram.com/pvecchiet. So PVECCHIET. And then on Facebook, it's facebook.com/ Paul Vecchiet, one word, Paulvecchiet, and the P and the V are capitalized. As always, you can listen to all my podcasts on Spotify and wherever you want. You can find everything, though, at spookychris.com. That includes all of my own books, my podcasts, my reviews, and regular old weird blogs, and anything else I have out there. I thank you for listening. I will talk to you again soon. Take care.